And let me walk you through a 3-step process that would actually get us to decisions that you are describing, right? Because ultimately what organizations are looking for is, what are the decision points that I need to consider? How much do those cost? What investments do I need to be making, and how do I execute upon that? So to help us really become in a position to answer those questions, we need to go back to the beginning of the Foresight practice, the futurist practice. And that has to do with us really beginning with what I call scanning. It's a simple term with a lot of different components. So when we're scanning, what we're doing is we're looking for early signals of change. What I do when I work with an organization is I say, let's get clear on the unit that we're focusing on. So for instance, in manufacturing, what we would say is, what is the future of supply chain? Would be the big question that we're asking, right? So we would ask a very specific question. And then what I would do is I would build a scanning protocol that helps us look across in very different arenas around what potentially might impact this idea of the current supply chain. So we look all the way from really big trends, like things like the gig economy, to demographics, to people moving out of cities, like these big shifts in how the world is working. So these are what I call sort of the really large macro trends. So we curate those and we look at those. Then we look at smaller micro trends. So this is where we start looking at edge cases around what are some of the most nuanced and compelling ways that potentially people are doing things like supply chain. I'm not an expert in supply chain, but I do know that there's things like drop shipping that have been organized, but that's been here for a while. So then I would ask the question, okay, if drop shipping was 10 years ago, what is now? What's the newest way that people are thinking about this? And we start looking for actual edge cases. And often we find those outside of current industry. We find them other places. So we're looking for examples of the edge cases. So we're curating a view of like, what are all these disruptors that are happening? What are, for lack of a better term, what are the trends? And how do we get them sort of on paper so we can start looking at them in the context of our own organization? So that's the number one step, is this big scanning component. This is where we have to break free from our traditional ideas around what the best practice is. I'm not looking at best practices at all. This is not benchmarking in any way. It is a complete departure to say, where can I find the most novel things that are happening?